Good morning, gentlemen. This is the Crisis to Courage Daily Prayer for Men, and it is September 17th, 2020. If you are just joining us, this is a daily prayer that we have every day at 8 o'clock PST time, which is in the US. And we have themes, and sometimes the themes are pre-prepared, like the day before, the week before, the month before, and other things or other times it's more on the fly. It is a prayer specifically for men 16 to 24 and men that are 25 plus, that are often stuck due to trauma. And the theme for today is leadership. Leadership. It is interesting that leadership is often defined by think about what leadership is to you. In this digital world, we think leadership is how many followers people get, likes, comments, that people begin imitating what you say or do. I was watching a Gary Vee video yesterday, and he was talking to some young people, young men, and they were lamenting because their parents wanted them to be X, Y, or Z. Like the one gentleman, his mother wanted him to be a lawyer or a doctor. And Gary was responding with, well, what do you want to be? And the young man was saying to him what he wanted to be. But he said his mother wanted him to be X, Y, or Z and wanted him to go to college for this. And he was torn. And Gary was saying that if you choose what the mother wants you to be and you don't operate your gifts, later you will resent her for not allowing you to do what you felt purpose to do. And I thought it was very good because the argument from the young man was, I love my mother. But Gary switched it up and said, eventually you'll resent and hate your mother. Why don't you love your mother by doing what you really want to do and what she has probably in some form or fashion or some other family member has encouraged you to operate your talents. And I thought it was very good because he demonstrated leadership in that he was telling them something possibly they didn't want to hear, but needed to hear. So you have this thing, right? So you have this thing that you want to do. And someone that you love is telling you, well, you need to do this. But they're telling you out of fear. They're not telling you out of promise or possibility because they fear they want you to have a good future or whatever. So they're telling you to take a less risky route, supposedly. But if you do what they're telling you to do, you're not going to be doing what God tells you to do. And then later, the person that you did it because you thought you loved them, you'll resent them and maybe even will hate them. And I love that leadership because he was willing to tell the truth, not because he was trying to get people to follow him or likes or popularity. He was telling them the truth because he really loved them. You could see it in his eyes. You could see the passion behind his words of how detrimental it is when you follow someone just because they want you to. It's not in your best interest. So that's what good leadership is. Leadership is when someone is willing to tell you something, not because of them, but because of you. And because they see something in the future for you. I'll give you a personal example from my own life. When I started this work with 16 to 24-year-olds and men that are 25 plus, but are still stuck there because of trauma, I started to see a trend that was deeply troubling and is deeply troubling to me saying this. I would have coaching clients because I started off first in coaching in the coach world. And I had coaching clients and they were 16 to 24-year-old young men and men that were 25 plus, but were definitely stuck there due to trauma. And they came to me as a coach because they had issues, and their mother sent them there because they had issues. And the rich boys that I had, that I really loved, had everything, every resource known to man. They had access to college and tutors and coaches. I mean, their parents paid a lot of money to have me coach their sons, to get them to do something, which some of them did, and some of them weren't my clients anymore because they refused to do anything, even though what was coming out of their mouths was, yes, I want to do all these X, Y, and Z things. And then I also had men who paid me good money, but they had abandonment issues. They had neglect issues, which were beyond the scope of coaching. Then I started to work with individuals that were 16 to 24 that were economically disadvantaged, and men that were 25 plus but were stuck there due to trauma. And I saw a very interesting parallel. Both groups were exactly the same. They were exactly the same. The only difference is one was economically disadvantaged and one was not. So basically, both groups were exactly the same, the rich as well as the poor. Now, everybody would say, well, they're the rich. They have everything. If I just had everything, I would be different, which is totally not true. Then I saw individuals that were very economically disadvantaged, and they had a lot of barriers, but they felt empowered. And the individuals that were empowered, but in very bad situations did better than the ones that had every advantage. And I was willing to say these things as a leader. Sometimes it didn't fare well. The people said, "How dare you ask me to change?" I was like, "Well, you came to me to change. That's my job." And a leader will tell you the hard thing, and they're willing to receive the hard thing. And the hard thing is men must repent. It's very simple. Jesus Christ was probably the greatest leader in history. And he said a prophet is without honor in his own country. For they had so much access to him and his miracles. And he did not sugarcoat the truth at all. Now, we might think that leaders are just people with a lot of likes and people that write books, like Gary Vee, or make a lot of money. And in some aspects, that's very true. But I know a leader that did a lot of work and did not have many likes or followers and changed the world, and that was Noah. Noah could have been so frustrated. No one is following me. But he was led by God, who told him to build an ark and gave him the absolute specifications of what the ark was supposed to look like and the materials. And because of Noah, I'm able to have this prayer with you. Gentlemen, this is a time where you're going to get on the boat or you're not. God is exposing. He is exposing lukewarmness. Elijah said, serve God or serve Baal. That's what real leadership is. Leadership is when you really love the people and you're willing to say the hard thing, even if it's not popular. Because if 8 people get on the boat, that's an amazing thing. I'll tell you something else, gentlemen. I work with individuals that are rich and individuals that don't have any money at all. I work with individuals with massive resources, and I work with individuals that have very little resources, or they see it that way. And without seeing yourself and your life the way God sees it, often you cannot enjoy any of the good things that God has given you. And that is a message that I would invite you strongly to consider today. This is what leadership is. It's when you're willing to tell the hard truth, even if nobody listens. I could tell when Gary Vee was telling the gentleman, like, he really wanted to believe, he wanted to choose his talents and his gifts. But the fear of disappointing his mother possibly could be leading him into a life that's never lived. As influential as Gary Vee is, I could see that the young man was not buying into what he was saying. And if something doesn't change, he will be living for another human being instead of the God who made, formed, and created him. And gentlemen, sadly, I have seen that. You cannot enjoy all the things that God freely gives you because of trauma, because of a python of shame, because of being emotionally castrated, when God is sending Noah to rescue you, to speak truth into your life, so you can enjoy the life that he's given you through his son. So you don't have to turn to anger and isolation and numbing behavior. But God says, my people are destroyed for one thing, lack of knowledge, not science or access to information. We have so much of that. We have it on overload 24/7. Can't be that. But my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. They have forsaken me. There it is. The fountain of living waters, and hewed out for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. So just like Noah put out the message of repentance and getting out and getting onto the boat, that is what God is saying today. It is not an easy message, but it is the message that he is giving. And as leaders of your families, as leaders in your community, you have a responsibility. And the only way you will ever be able to not only execute on that responsibility, but actually enjoy the responsibility of raising a family, being in a community, utilizing your talents, your gifts, and your abilities to the fullest in your business, on your job, in your volunteer work, is by following God through his son. So, Father, I thank you that the theme today was leadership, that we learned from Mr. Gary Vee and also from the great Noah, even though they're not in the same venue, that leadership is often saying the hard thing. God, and I thank you that these men will have ears to hear, that they must turn away from these wicked things, and they can't do it on their own. All they have to do is turn to you and put down their idolatrous practices, because they have stooped to bow and bell. And it's all over their lives. And they themselves have gone into captivity. And Papa, you are the only one that can loosen the bands of wickedness. You're the only one. You're the only one that can undo the heavy burdens. You're the only one that can let the oppressed go free. They don't even know there's a lie in their right hand. They can't even say, is there a lie in my right hand? The place of blessing? No, they can't even say that. Just like David said, innumerable evils have surrounded me. I'm not able to even look up. So, Father, I thank you the same way that Nehemiah grieved for his people. Father, I'm pouring out these prayers for these men who are desperately needed for such a time as this. And only you can awaken them from the dead sleep. Only you can say to these bones, can they live again? Only you, no one else. So God, I thank you for the theme of this prayer, which is leadership. And men would rise up so they can be leaders in their own lives and leaders in their families. Papa, there is no one like you. There's no one like your Son. We serve a loving, powerful God that hears this prayer, and from it, signs and miracles and wonders will occur. In Jesus Christ's precious name.